I'm Francesca Maxime, and this is Currents. Breaking news, updates to the church's policy on sex abuse and what it means for you. Academic freedom or hate speech? We'll get the story behind the firing of a Catholic college professor. And preparing for the media barrage when the Pope visits the United Kingdom. Well, good evening and thank you so much for joining us. Matt McClure has the night off. It is the news everyone was waiting for. The Vatican today released its updated norms for dealing with priests who sexually abuse children. We get more from Rome Reports.
The Vatican prosecutor for sex abuse cases has presented the new church rules to combat sex abuse and to judge priests who have committed crimes more quickly.
I think it gives a signal that we are very, very serious on our commitment to promote safe environments and to offer an adequate response to abuse.
The new Vatican rules against sex abuse are a set of processes and sanctions exclusively internal to the Church. The rules are not intended to replace state laws, which the Vatican has ordered to respect as well.
If state law requires reporting, we must absolutely obey. No excuses. If the law allows the victim to decide whether to report or not, we must respect the legislator's decision.
The new Vatican text is an update to the apostolic letter Sacramentorum Sanctitatis Tutula concerning serious crimes against morality and the sacraments. The majority of the new Vatican norms convert prior provisions into law. From now on, the Church will proceed internally against an accused priest up to 20 years after the victim's 18th birthday. The previous statute was 10 years after the victim turned 18. The Church also reserves the right to further extend the period in exceptional cases. The statute for criminal law varies, but the Church can still sanction an accused priest even after the civil period has passed. In severe cases, the accused likely will be expelled from the priesthood. The text includes several new changes: possession of child pornography, abuse of mentally disabled adults, and the recording of confessions using new technologies are all now considered serious offenses. Laity may now be judges or lawyers in these processes. Internal sanctions against accused priests can range from a ban on appearing in public as a priest or celebrating Mass to expulsion from the priesthood in serious cases. Another important change now makes the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith responsible for trying cardinals, patriarchs, and bishops for these offenses.
All right, well, quite a bit to digest there, and to help us do so, we're going to be joined on the phone right now by leading Vatican watcher, author of the blog Whispers in the Loggia. He's also a contributor to Currents, Rocco Palmo. Hey, Rocco, how you doing?
All right, Francesca, how's it going?
Good, thanks. Let's get right to it. What do you think is the most important and most significant aspect about these new guidelines from the Vatican, these updated guidelines?
I think the most significant part of it is simply that a process which is now 10 years old for the universal handling of these cases can be handled a lot more effectively, quickly, and fully. This is basically a kind of lessons learned since the Vatican started processing these cases centrally in 2001, and basically what it does is it keeps everything within the offices of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, the Vatican's lead orthodoxy watcher. Part of the problem before was that things would get kicked around from one office to another, and maybe it would take a long time, but also it would just be there'd be too many cooks in the kitchen. So the CDF, which has been very aggressive in handling these cases, now essentially has complete dominance or complete oversight of everything.
All right, very well. Well, do you think that this actually ends up changing anything? Some people might say that it doesn't actually put in place actual changes. It just sort of reinforces the rules that were already on the books or beefs them up a little bit.
Well, I think part of it, is that because to respect the reputation of everybody involved, the trials are kept secret. This isn't, American justice with, cameras in the courtroom and transcribers and everything like that. But, it's important to note, and I think a lot of people have forgotten it or it hasn't been reported as much as it should have been in the last couple months, but the Vatican has basically Pope Benedict, his successor now, Cardinal William Levada at the CDF, have overseen the dismissal from ministry of 3,000 priests from around the world. And that's essentially been 95% or more of every case submitted to the Vatican since 2001 when they took over. And again, this, there are those who are saying, well, the Vatican is responding to public pressure by this. But it's actually, the Vatican was on the ball with this a year before the abuse storm in the United States began in Boston. So way before the public reaction, the terrible stories that we saw from prior decades, the Vatican had, gotten religion and given its culture, has gotten up to speed at an exceptional pace.
There are still some that will say that there's not enough accountability for bishops that oversee priests that are accused of clergy sexual abuse. What do you think that this ruling will have, or rather this new set of guidelines will do in that regard, if anything?
Well, as Monsignor Scicluna said in the piece, it's only a document. Documents can only do so much. But if anything, over the past couple months, we've seen the resignation of more bishops involved in cover-ups of abuse. I mean, the Pope has essentially drawn a line in the sand when it comes to, if reports surface, you're going, essentially. I mean, 6 Irish bishops who were involved in a decades-long operation, really, in the Archdiocese of Dublin, have resigned. Bishops in other countries have resigned, in Germany and in Austria. So it's been again, I mean, and bigger than any law in the Church is what the Pope says and what he does, and I think that's been enough to send a message.
There was also a change to the status of those who attempt to ordain women as priests. That's a little perplexing. Why do you think that was thrown in there as well at this time?
Well, in this case, it was the attempted ordination of a woman has been a canonical crime, but now, again, just the process has been clarified for how it's handled. That is subject to automatic excommunication. There are those who have said, and perhaps rightly so, that it's, why not the abuse of a minor be subject to excommunication, automatic and immediate excommunication as well. But there's another way of looking at it. I mean, the attempted ordination of a woman was another one of the canonical crimes treated. But another one of the canonical crimes treated was the profanation or the abuse of the Blessed Sacrament, doing something improper with the Eucharist, throwing it out or something like that. So if you look at it on the other hand, that the abuse of a minor is seen in the grade of abuse of the Blessed Sacrament, which, as Catholics we believe is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus, that the abuse of a minor is being compared to an abuse of Christ himself. I mean, that's, you can't really get much more severe in Catholic life than that level.
Well, Rocco, that is where we'll have to leave it for today. Thank you so much for joining us on Currents. We will continue to watch this issue closely.
Anytime, Francesca. Thanks so much.
Thanks. And we also want to hear what you have to say at home about today's news. Just head to our website at currentsny.net, and there you can find links to our Facebook and our Twitter pages. You can send us your thoughts, and you can also email us if you prefer that method. Our email address is dropusaline@currentsny.net. That's dropusaline, all one word, at currentsny.net. Stay tuned. When Currents returns, we'll have the day's headlines, including local reaction to the news from the Vatican. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Francesca Maxime. Coming up just a bit later, one way that England is getting ready for the Pope's visit. But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. As we've been telling you, the Vatican today released updated rules for dealing with serious crimes, including the sexual abuse of children by priests. Bishop Blaise Cupich, who chairs the U.S. Bishops' Committee on the Protection of Children and Young People, called it a welcome step forward. He said the Church is making clear that child sexual abuse, quote, violates the core values of our faith, unquote. Now, we also wanted to get some local reaction to today's news. So earlier, we spoke with a frequent guest on Currents, Monsignor Guy Massey.
I'm not a canon lawyer, so I'm looking at these procedures as a parish priest and a priest who is in this diocese and a person who is concerned about the recent sexual scandal that has rocked the Catholic Church. Americans, particularly New Yorkers, like mandates. Do this, or do that. This is the closest we're getting to exactly what is being asked for. This is how the Church universally deals with these grave crimes. And it is very serious to remove someone from the clerical state. That crime, a removal from the clerical state, tells us just how grave the Church holds this behavior. I'm glad it was published. I'm happy to see this, and I think we're going in the right direction.
In other news, the United Nations says the Vatican is 13 years overdue in sending a report on child rights. The Vatican was required through an agreement it signed in 1989 to file regular reports on its efforts to safeguard children. A Vatican official was reportedly unavailable to comment. An Arizona bishop had strong words on immigration yesterday in testimony before Congress. Tucson Bishop Gerald Kakanis told a congressional panel that the bishops believe comprehensive reform would require illegal immigrants to pay a fine and back taxes, learn English, and get in the back of the line. In written testimony, Kakanis added that reform should also include a legalization program for undocumented workers. Kakanis' diocese runs the entire length of the Arizona-Mexico border. From Venezuela, President Hugo Chavez has announced his country will rethink its relations with the Vatican. We get more now from Rome Reports.
The president of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, has ordered a review of all agreements signed with the Vatican, including those signed prior to his presidency. The decision could lead to a fracture in diplomatic relations between the two states. The Venezuelan ambassador to the Holy See will leave Rome within the next few hours to meet with the Venezuelan president and to mediate in reviewing agreements. According to Chavez, pacts signed with the Catholic Church are a privilege that is detrimental to other faiths in Venezuela. Clashes between Chavez and bishops escalated in 2006 with the appointment of Jorge Rosa as the Cardinal of Caracas. Chavez has called Rosa a fascist, oligarchic, and 100 times worse than his predecessor. Venezuela has a population of 30 million, of which 96% is Catholic.
Argentina yesterday became the first Latin American country to legalize gay marriage. The Senate there approved a bill which also gives same-sex couples the right to adopt children. The new law faced fierce opposition. One bishop called it absurd and a rejection of God. Meanwhile, an Argentine archbishop has begun proceedings against a priest who made public statements supporting gay marriage. The soccer player who scored the winning goal in the World Cup has promised to go on a pilgrimage. Andres Iniesta will walk the Way of St. James, which leads to Santiago de Compostela, the place where the relics of St. James are venerated. Stay tuned, there's much more current straight ahead. Just ahead, was a professor fired for teaching about Catholicism? We'll hear from a group that's come to his defense. Welcome back. Well, is explaining Catholic teaching hate speech? Last week, that question was being debated all around the country. An adjunct professor at the University of Illinois was fired, allegedly, for explaining the Catholic stand on homosexual behavior in a class on Catholicism. That professor, Kenneth Howell, is fighting to get his job back. He is being represented by the Alliance Defense Fund, and yesterday, I spoke with his attorney, Jordan Lawrence. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us here on Currents today. We appreciate it.
It's good to be here.
You are representing Dr. Kenneth Howell from the Alliance Defense Fund in a free speech issue. Talk to us about the case and why you took it on.
Well, basically what happened is that since 2001, Professor Howell has taught a class in Catholic theology at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. And basically, he was fired because he gave the Catholic Church's position on marriage and its opposition to homosexual behavior. This sparked an intense discussion in class. He followed up with an email. This email circulated, and anonymous students who were not students in the class forwarded it to university officials and said, please fire him. He's an adjunct professor because he engaged in what they called hate speech. and the university quickly did so several weeks ago. And what we at the Alliance Defense Fund have done is asked for the university to reinstate him.
Okay. How do you distinguish what would be hate speech and what would be actually an explanation of Catholic teaching in an academic sense?
Well, the hate speech aspect, I think, is totally inappropriate in an academic setting because you should be able to study most anything just as a point of, as some sort of academic tool to learn something. And that a university cannot censor a professor's speech, especially if it's comments he makes in a classroom setting on the subject that the class is on, just because some students are offended, anonymous students who aren't even part of the class here. So this was not hate speech. There wasn't like some direct threat to any student. There wasn't anything like that. What the students opposed was that he dared even to explain that there are people and entities like the Catholic Church that take an official stance that homosexual behavior is immoral. That was the thing that got him the boot. No academic deficiencies, no problems with his teaching. He was just saying the wrong thing in a politically charged environment there on campus.
Okay, and so obviously he has not been teaching, I suppose it's summer recess at a certain point, but he's currently fired. But what are the next steps? I mean, what are you going to actually do to try and get him reinstated?
Well, we've written a letter to the university outlining how what they did violated the First Amendment, and we've asked for an answer to come by Friday, the 16th, and July 16th, and we'll see what they do then. And litigating this matter, filing a lawsuit against the university for violating Professor Howell's First Amendment rights is something we are seriously considering. Now, the university has convened a faculty senate committee to investigate this and see if there was a violation of academic freedom. And but the process is taking very, very slow. There's been this sort of shoot first, eliminate him from his job, his classroom position, and then ask questions later. They should reinstate him, and if there was any something inappropriate that he did, which we think that there is not, then they can remove him. But right now, it's just the bare allegations, a bunch of anonymous students.
Is this a case, do you think, of anti-Catholicism?
Yes, and I think that I think more precisely, I think it is opposition to those who say that there's anything morally wrong with homosexual activity, or that marriage should be defined only as one man and one woman. That probably if he were Mormon or an evangelical, he'd probably be suffering the same fate. But it's definitely, you are not allowed to be a member of the academy and to hold these more traditional positions on homosexual activity and marriage. And that's why he got into trouble. And I think universities are supposed to be the marketplace of ideas, and here we have an authoritarian overreach to silence a critic, to silence somebody who dissents, even graciously, from the prevailing orthodoxy at most public universities.
Well, Jordan Lawrence, thank you so much for your time on Current today. We will closely watch what happens from here. Thank you.
Thank you.
And as Jordan Lawrence indicated, the University of Illinois is now reviewing Professor Howell's dismissal. It is expected to complete the review before the start of the fall semester. Well, stay right where you are. There's more Currents to come. When we return, Catholic voices are getting ready to be heard ahead of the Pope's trip to the UK. Two months from tomorrow, Pope Benedict begins his historic trip to the United Kingdom, one that could be one of the most important in his pontificate. Not just a pastoral visit, it will also be a state visit, the first time a pope has gone to Great Britain at the invitation of the Queen. He will also be visiting Parliament and speaking to all the people of Great Britain, not just Catholics. Understandably, the interest in this trip is intense, and as we hear from Rome Reports, a group in the UK is undertaking an unusual mission to train Catholics there in how to talk to the media.
With the Pope's visit to the UK approaching, the Catholic Church is likely to be discussed heavily in the media. In anticipation of this, a group of lay Catholics are training other Catholics on how to speak effectively to the media on any issues such as politics, clerical sex abuse, the papacy, and the beatification of Cardinal Newman. Volunteer speakers are taught principles of the media, how the media works, and what makes a news story. In this way, they can better explain some misunderstandings about the Church's teachings and be prepared to speak on the Church with short notice.
The training is particularly useful for getting guidance on how to explain our faith and our beliefs clearly to people who don't share those beliefs.
This initiative was launched in February of 2010 after Pope Benedict XVI's address to the English and Welsh bishops in Rome. He called upon UK Catholics to follow the footsteps of Cardinal Newman in courageously communicating their faith. Catholic Voices does not speak officially on behalf of UK bishops, but has their blessing.
Our voice needs to be heard, and it needs to be heard in a way that's accurate and reasonable, not distorted, because we have our part to play in British society and we need to be heard.
Speakers are trained through TV and radio interviews conducted by media professionals. The interviews are recorded and played back so that everyone can give feedback.
These are people who don't know the world of media, and the world of media doesn't know them. So what Catholic Voices is about is connecting the TV and radio studios with this group of people. So it serves both the church and the media.
The immediate goal of this Bureau of Catholic Speakers is to provide speakers on short notice to the various news outlets that will cover Benedict XVI's visit to the UK in September. The 22 speakers range from ages 20 to 40 and have diverse backgrounds and experiences. Among them are lawyers, students, a pharmacist, a former atheist, and a scientist. After the Pope's visit, Catholic Voices hopes to continue to be a valuable service to the Church and to the media.
Well, of course, we'll be having much more on the Pope's trip in the days and weeks to come. That is it for tonight. Coming up tomorrow, should you take a gun to church? We'll talk to some people who have some strong opinions about that. We have that and much more tomorrow. Until then, remember, we are always online at currentsny.net. You can also check us out on Facebook. And if you have an idea for a story, or if you just want to get in touch with us, you can drop us a line at currentsny.net. That is our email address. Until next time, I'm Francesca Maxime. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.